I never thought I'd own my dream house at 29, but here I was, standing in front of a beautiful two-story colonial with a wraparound porch. My name is Robin Mitchell, and I've worked my ass off to get here. After 5 years as an investment manager at Sterling and Associates, I finally had enough saved up for a substantial down payment. "This is it, Derek," I said to my husband, squeezing his hand as we stood in the driveway. "What do you think?" Derek smiled, his brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's perfect, babe, you did good." That's one of the things I loved about Derek. He was always supportive of my career and never seemed threatened by my success. When I told him I wanted to buy the house with my own money and put it in my name, he didn't even flinch. "You earned it," he said simply. "Besides, I'm saving up for our future kids' college funds. We're a team, right?" I remember hugging him tight that day, thinking how lucky I was to have such an understanding partner. Most guys I knew would have thrown a fit about their wife buying a house, but not Derek. He worked as a high school teacher, and while his salary wasn't anywhere near what I made, he never complained or acted jealous. The day we moved in, I couldn't stop smiling. The house was everything I'd dreamed of: 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a backyard perfect for future barbecues and kids' birthday parties. I'd made sure to put down enough money so the monthly mortgage payments wouldn't strain us too much. Being an investment manager had taught me the importance of living within our means. "You know what we should do," Derek said as we unpacked boxes in the kitchen. "We should have dinner with my parents this weekend. They'll want to see pictures of the house." "That's a great idea," I agreed, unwrapping our wedding china. "We should visit my family too." That evening, as Derek and I sat on our new porch swing watching the sunset, everything seemed perfect. We talked about our plans for the house, how we'd decorate each room, where we'd plant a garden in the spring, which bedroom would become the nursery when we started our family. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to Derek's steady breathing beside me, I felt completely at peace. I'd achieved my dream of owning a beautiful home, I had a loving husband, and our future seemed bright with possibility. I drifted off to sleep, thinking about how perfect everything was. That first dinner with Derek's parents was supposed to be a simple celebration of our new home. Martha and George had always been kind to me, treating me like their own daughter since Derek and I started dating 5 years ago. They lived in a modest ranch-style house across town, and Martha had prepared her famous pot roast for the occasion. "So, tell us all about the house," Martha exclaimed as she passed the mashed potatoes. Her gray hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I opened my mouth to answer, but Derek beat me to it. "Actually, I wanted to surprise you guys," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I bought us this amazing house. 4 bedrooms, beautiful backyard, you're going to love it when you see it." I nearly choked on my water. Derek squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes pleading with me to stay quiet. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced a smile and stayed silent. "Oh, Derek," Martha clasped her hands together. "That's wonderful." "Isn't it wonderful, George?" George beamed at his son. "That's my boy, always knew you'd do well for yourself." He turned to me. "You've got yourself quite a generous husband here, Robin. Not many young men these days can afford to buy a house like that." I nodded mechanically, pushing food around my plate. The pot roast that had smelled so delicious minutes ago now felt like lead in my stomach. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of lies, Derek describing how he'd saved up for the down payment, his parents praising his financial responsibility, and me sitting there feeling like I was in some bizarre alternate reality. The drive home was silent until we pulled into our driveway that my money had bought. "What the hell was that?" I demanded as soon as we got inside. Derek ran his hands through his dark hair, a nervous habit I'd noticed early in our relationship. "I'm sorry, Robin, you know my dad, he's old school. He'd never understand a man living in a house his wife bought. It would kill him, and my reputation." "Your reputation?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Please, Robin," he begged. "Can we just let people think I bought the house? It doesn't hurt anyone, and it makes things easier for everyone. I shook my head, thinking how childish this whole thing was, but looking at his pleading face, I didn't have the heart to argue. Fine, I sighed, whatever makes you happy. A week later, we were sitting in my parents' living room, and history repeated itself. My mom and dad were there, along with my younger sister Emma, who was visiting from her apartment downtown. Emma and I had always been close, despite being different as night and day. While I was the practical one who went into finance, she was the free spirit who jumped from job to job, trying to find herself. We bought a house, Derek announced proudly. Well, I did. Wanted to give Robin the home she deserves. I watched my family's reactions like I was watching a movie. Mom and Dad were beaming, congratulating Derek on his success. But it was Emma's face that caught my attention. She smiled and offered her congratulations, but I knew my sister too well to miss the flash of jealousy in her eyes. She'd always wanted the perfect house, the perfect life, and here I was, living her dream, or so she thought. 2 weeks after the family dinners, I threw a housewarming party. I'd spent days preparing everything, setting up the new furniture, hanging artwork, and making sure every room looked perfect. The house was filled with the smell of appetizers and the sound of laughter as our friends and family arrived. "Let me give you the grand tour," Derek announced to the group, puffing out his chest like a proud peacock. "Wait until you see what I picked out for the master bathroom." I almost snorted into my wine glass. The master bathroom he was so proud of? I'd chosen every tile, every fixture, and even that fancy rainfall showerhead he loved so much. But there he was, leading our guests from room to room, talking about his vision for the house and how hard he'd worked to afford it all. The party was a success, and life settled into a comfortable routine. Derek and I both worked during the day, came home to our beautiful house in the evening, and spent weekends making it more and more like home. Everything was perfect, until exactly 6 months after the housewarming party. I was enjoying a quiet Sunday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emma standing there, her mascara running down her cheeks and her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Emma, what's wrong?" I pulled her inside, genuinely concerned. My sister wasn't the type to cry easily. "They cut my hours at work," she choked out, collapsing onto our couch. "I'm barely making part-time now, and my rent." She dissolved into fresh tears. I sat beside her, rubbing her back like I used to when we were kids and she'd had a nightmare. "How bad is it?" "I can't afford my apartment anymore, Robin, I need a place to stay." She looked up at me with those big brown eyes we'd both inherited from our mom. "Can I stay here? Just until I figure something out?" I hesitated. "What about Mom and Dad's place? They have that spare room." "Their house is on the other side of town," Emma protested, wiping her eyes. "It would take me forever to get to work from there." "Your place is perfect, it's close to everything, and you have all these empty bedrooms." "I don't know, Emma, let me think about it." She nodded reluctantly, and I promised to call her later. Not 10 minutes after she left, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Robin, your sister just called me crying," she said without preamble. "You have to let her stay with you. She's family." That evening, I discussed it with Derek over dinner. "Emma needs a place to stay," I explained, pushing my pasta around my plate. "She's in a tough spot with work, and she should stay with us," Derek said immediately. "We have the room, and she's family. It'll be fun having her around." I looked at him in surprise. Derek had always gotten along well with Emma, but I hadn't expected him to be so enthusiastic about having a house guest. A few days later, Emma moved in. I helped her set up in one of the spare bedrooms, the one with the best morning light that I'd been planning to turn into a home office. The first few weeks weren't bad at all. In fact, they were surprisingly pleasant. I'd come home from a long day at the investment firm to find dinner on the table, not just takeout or simple pasta, but real, home-cooked meals. The house was spotless, laundry was always done, and Emma seemed genuinely happy to help. But then things started to change. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I wondered if I was imagining it. Here's your coffee, Derek, Emma would say at breakfast, setting down his mug with a flourish. Black with just a hint of sugar, exactly how you like it. Robin always makes it too sweet, doesn't she? Or she'd be folding laundry and comment, I noticed your shirts were always wrinkled before, Derek. A little extra care makes such a difference, don't you think? I tried to ignore it, but the constant comparisons were getting under my skin. One evening, after a particularly pointed comment about how she'd finally gotten the kitchen properly organized, I pulled her aside. Emma, can we talk? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. These comments you're making. She looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. What comments? About being a better hostess, about how much better the house is since you moved in. Emma laughed, waving her hand dismissively. Oh my God, Robin, you're being so sensitive. I'm just joking around. Don't tell me you're jealous of your little sister doing some housework? But it wasn't just the comments. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find Emma in the kitchen wearing what could barely be called clothing, a sheer tank top and tiny shorts that left little to the imagination. Derek was sitting at the counter, ostensibly working on his laptop, but his eyes kept drifting up. Emma, I hissed, pulling her into the hallway. What are you wearing? It's hot in here, she protested, but her smirk said otherwise. Go change, now. She rolled her eyes but complied, switching into her regular loungewear. Later that night, as Derek and I were getting ready for bed, he brought it up. Don't you think you were a bit harsh with Emma earlier? He asked, climbing into bed. She's just comfortable around family. I stared at him. She was practically naked. You're exaggerating, besides, it's her home too now. His words hit me like a slap. Her home? When had that happened? The next morning, I confronted Emma over breakfast. Have you started looking for apartments yet? I asked directly. Her face crumpled immediately. Robin, I'm trying, but I can barely save anything with my reduced hours. Everything's so expensive. She doesn't have to move, Derek interrupted, not looking up from his phone. We've got plenty of room, and it's nice having her here. The three of us work well together. I looked between my husband and my sister, him casually defending her presence in my house, her with that subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and felt a chill run down my spine. The Anderson deal was huge, potentially the biggest investment contract of my career. When my boss told me I needed to fly to Phoenix to meet with them personally, I knew it was important to nail this. I'll be gone for 3 days, I told Derek and Emma over dinner the night before my flight. The negotiations might take a while. The meetings in Phoenix went better than I could have imagined. Mr. Anderson was impressed with my presentation and agreed to all our terms without the usual back and forth I'd expected. By the end of the second day, we were signing papers. You've got quite a future ahead of you, Mrs. Mitchell, he said as we shook hands. Sterling and Associates is lucky to have you. I called the airline and managed to get an earlier flight home. Wouldn't Derek be proud? This deal would mean a significant bonus, maybe enough to pay off a big chunk of the mortgage early. The taxi dropped me off at our house around 8 p.m. The lights were on upstairs, and I could see Derek's car in the driveway. I smiled, thinking about surprising them with the good news. I unlocked the front door quietly, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood floors. There were wine glasses on the coffee table, 2 of them, and something that looked like Emma's blouse draped over the banister. My stomach lurched as I climbed the stairs. I could hear music playing faintly from our bedroom, and soft voices. I pushed open the door. Time seemed to stop. The scene before me burned itself into my brain, Derek and Emma in our bed, tangled in the sheets I'd picked out when we first moved in. They didn't notice me at first, too wrapped up in each other. Then Emma saw me and smiled. Actually smiled. Robin, Derek scrambled to cover himself. This isn't. I can explain. Emma stretched lazily and got up, not bothering to cover herself. Oh, don't bother explaining, Derek. She started collecting her clothes from the floor. She was bound to find out eventually. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hands shaking. How long? My voice sounded strange, distant. A few weeks now, Emma said casually, pulling on her clothes. We're in love, aren't we, Derek? Derek looked like he might be sick. Oh, and there's one more thing, Emma added, her hand drifting to her stomach. I'm pregnant. Found out a few days ago. Derek's head snapped up, his face going pale. Clearly, this was news to him too. Get out, I whispered, then louder, both of you, get out of my house. Emma laughed, actually laughed. Your house? Oh, honey, I think you're confused. She turned to me with a vicious smile. This is Derek's house, he bought it, remember? You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. I stood there, staring at my sister as the reality of the situation hit me. She had believed the lie. All this time, she thought she was stealing a wealthy man and his house. She had no idea that everything, every single thing around us, was mine. I couldn't help it, I started laughing. The sound bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, slightly hysterical, but unstoppable. Emma's face twisted in confusion. What's so funny? You're being kicked out of your home and you're laughing? I wiped tears from my eyes, still chuckling. Oh, Emma, sweet, delusional Emma. This house? The one you think you're going to live in with my cheating husband? It's mine. Every brick, every tile, every piece of furniture, I bought it all. You're lying, Emma spat, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her eyes. The Mercedes Derek drives? Also mine. I bought it last year because he said his old car wasn't professional enough for a teacher. I turned to Derek. Tell her the truth. Derek seemed to shrink under Emma's fierce gaze. It's true, he mumbled, staring at the floor. Everything belongs to Robin. I just told everyone I bought it because I wanted to look successful. The color drained from Emma's face. She grabbed one of our decorative pillows, the ones I'd spent hours picking out, and started hitting Derek with it. You liar. You pathetic, worthless liar. Both of you, stop, I said, my voice cutting through Emma's screams and Derek's attempts to defend himself. I'm done with this circus. You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out of my house. But, Derek started. Don't worry about the divorce papers, I interrupted. I'll have them sent to your parents' house. Emma's demeanor changed instantly. The rage disappeared, replaced by that manipulative sweetness I'd grown so familiar with. Robin, you can't kick me out. I'm your sister, your pregnant sister. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, I checked my watch. 55 minutes left. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police. I turned and walked downstairs to the kitchen, leaving them scrambling to gather their things. My hands were steady as I made myself a coffee with the fancy machine I'd bought last Christmas. I sat at the kitchen island, sipping slowly, listening to the chaos upstairs. My phone rang 10 minutes later. Mom's name flashed on the screen. How dare you, she screeched, before I could even say hello. Kicking your pregnant sister out onto the street? What kind of monster are you? She seduced my husband, I said flatly. They've been having an affair for weeks. And when I caught them, she tried to kick me out of my house. There was a brief silence, then, well, maybe you should let them have the house. You're successful, you can afford to rent an apartment. Emma's pregnant now, she needs stability. It would be the kind thing to do, letting them have the house. I sat there, stunned by my mother's words. I don't want to have this conversation, I said, my voice ice cold. In fact, I don't want to talk to you at all right now. I hung up before she could respond, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I barely recognized myself, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was time to become someone new, someone stronger. The hour passed, both quickly and painfully slowly. Doors slammed, drawers banged, and occasional sobs, Emma's, I assumed, echoed through the house. Finally, they appeared at the bottom of the stairs, each carrying bags. Emma's mascara was streaked down her face, but her eyes were hard when she looked at me. "You'll regret this," she spat venomously. "You think you're so perfect with your big house and your fancy job. You'll end up alone and miserable." I didn't even bother responding. There was nothing left to say. I watched from the window as they loaded their bags into Emma's beat-up Corolla. As they drove away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I immediately turned off my phone, knowing what was coming. The calls, the texts, the family drama, I couldn't deal with any of it right now. When morning came, I turned my phone back on, wincing at the flood of notifications. 37 missed calls. 62 text messages. Voicemails from both sets of parents, from Emma, from Derek. I ignored them all and dialed my lawyer's number instead. "Barbara? It's Robin Mitchell. I need to file for divorce." Barbara, bless her, didn't ask for details. "Come by the office at 11. We'll get started." I called into work, explaining I needed a personal day. My boss was understanding. The Anderson deal had put me in his good graces. I spent 2 hours with Barbara, going over the details of the divorce filing, then headed home. I was fumbling with my keys at the front door when I heard voices behind me. I turned to find both sets of parents standing in my driveway. Mom and Dad looked furious, while Martha was crying and George's face was red with anger. "How dare you throw them out?" Mom demanded as they followed me inside. "Your own sister, your husband. You can't just kick a man out of his own house," George added. "The house he bought." I'd had enough. I walked to my home office, pulled out the folder of house documents I kept there, and returned to the living room. "Actually," I said, spreading the papers on the coffee table, "let me show you something interesting." They gathered around as I pointed to the documents. "Look at the buyer's name. Look at where the down payment came from. Look at who's on the mortgage." I watched their faces as realization dawned. This house? Every penny came from me. The car Derek drives? Also mine. He didn't pay for any of it. But he said," Martha stammered. "He lied," I said simply. "He told everyone he bought the house because he was too insecure to admit his wife was the breadwinner. He's been living off my success while pretending it was his own." "That lying little ass," George exploded, his face turning even redder. "I raised him better than this." After the in-laws left, Mom and Dad lingered. The documents were still spread across my coffee table, irrefutable proof of my ownership, but somehow that didn't matter to them. "Robin, you need to be reasonable about this," Dad said, using his rational parent voice that I remembered from childhood arguments. "They're starting a family." "A family?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean my husband and my sister's betrayal baby?" "Don't be cruel," Mom snapped. "That's your niece or nephew you're talking about. Think about the child's future." I stood up, my patience finally exhausted. "Let me get this straight. My sister sleeps with my husband, tries to steal my house, and I'm supposed to just hand over everything I've worked for?" "You've always been selfish," Mom said, her voice trembling. "Always thinking about yourself. When you were little, you never shared your toys with Emma." "This isn't about toys, Mom. This is my life, my home, my marriage they destroyed." "If you don't help your sister," Dad interjected, "if you don't share what you have, we'll have no choice but to cut ties with you." I walked to the front door and opened it. "Get out." They left, Mom's final words ringing in my ears, "You'll regret this. Your own family." I slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. Despite Emma's constant pushing, I heard through mutual friends, Derek never tried to claim any of the property. He knew better. He'd seen all the paperwork, knew every asset was in my name. Fighting would just waste money he didn't have on lawyer fees he couldn't afford. I threw myself into work, taking on more clients, closing bigger deals. The Anderson contract was just the beginning. I redecorated the house, erasing every trace of them. New furniture, new paint, new everything. The master bedroom where I'd found them became my home office. I couldn't sleep there anyway. Through social media, before I blocked them all, I watched their story unfold like a bad soap opera. They got married in a small ceremony at my parents' house. Emma posted endless updates about her pregnancy, playing the role of glowing mother-to-be. She never missed a chance to paint herself as the victim, dropping comments about toxic family members and selfish sisters who abandoned their pregnant siblings. The latest update, shared by a colleague who still followed her, showed her and Derek squeezed into my old childhood bedroom at our parents' house. The caption read, "Making the best of things, while cruel people live in luxury. But we have love, and that's what matters." I closed the tab without reading the comments. Let them play happy family in their borrowed bedroom. Let my parents coddle them and pretend their precious Emma did nothing wrong. Let them all live in their bubble of delusion. Me? I'm doing just fine. The house is peaceful now, filled with only my things, my choices, my life. Sometimes silence is better than toxic company, and sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you need to keep.